I'm Susan Murphy. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, it's more than a tap takeover. The San Diego craft brewer at the heart of a billion-dollar sale. The beer experts who say the glass is still half full for San Diego's beer scene.
And we'll take a closer look at the Syrian refugee crisis in light of the terrorist attacks in Paris. I'm Peggy Pico. How the attacks are impacting San Diego's Muslim community. Then, San Diego City Council wants to hear from you about their plan to raise water rates by a lot, why the rates could go up, and how you can weigh in.
I don't feel like this is a low point at all, actually. This is one of the first times since I was 15 years old that I've actually been sober on my birthday.
Signs of hope after war, the new push to find veterans behind bars, and the people helping them start new lives off the battlefield. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. On high alert tonight, French authorities have identified key suspects who may be behind the terrorist attacks in Paris. The City of Lights and the world continue to mourn for the 129 people killed last Friday. Associated Press reporter Matthew Burgoyne has more on the investigation.
Wallahi! The Islamic State group has released a video showing one of its fighters in Iraq vowing to attack Washington next. The nearly 12-minute video shows fighters praising Friday's attacks in Paris that killed 129 people and injured hundreds more. Speaking at the G20 summit in Turkey, President Obama conceded that the attacks were a setback in the fight against the Islamic State group.
We have always understood that this would be a long-term campaign. There will be setbacks and there will be successes. The terrible events in Paris were obviously a terrible and sickening setback.
A massive manhunt is underway for 26-year-old Salah Abdeslam, who was identified as the alleged driver of a rental car that delivered attackers to the Bataclan Theater, where 89 people were murdered. Belgian police mounted a tense hours-long standoff outside his suspected hideout in the Brussels district of Molenbeek, but made no arrests. Meanwhile, French jets took off from Jordan Sunday night, launching massive airstrikes against the Islamic State group's de facto capital in Raqqa, Syria. French President François Hollande told a rare joint session of Parliament Monday that he wants to unite the U.S. and Russia in a coalition dedicated to smashing the Islamic State group. And the Eiffel Tower, which had gone dark in a show of mourning, was lit up in the colors of the country's flag Monday night. Matthew Burgoyne, Associated Press.
Cal State Long Beach students returned to class today for the first time after a classmate was killed in Paris. Crisis counselors and social workers on campus are offering to help those coping with the death of 23-year-old Naomi Gonzalez, who was among the 129 people killed on Friday. She was studying abroad in Paris. There was also a moment of silence for the Long Beach student today at UC San Diego. The somber moment was marked at the beginning of the college's International Education Week. The dean of the campus International Center says they'll work even harder to promote international study as a solution for world problems.
Increasing international exchange and world understanding, with the ultimate goal of finding a peaceful, harmonious world before us.
Organizers say it's about having hope for a world, especially in challenging times. San Diegans are showing their solidarity with the French people following last week's deadly terrorist attacks. A makeshift memorial of cards and the French flag are hung along 10th Avenue in downtown. One reads, "Standing strong with our French brothers and sisters." Another, "We shall triumph over evil." At the House of France in Balboa Park, another memorial of flowers, candles, and signs has formed. Sarah Bobiot was walking through the park today. The 24-year-old Parisian says she finds the tributes and support comforting. She's been on vacation in California for the past 2 weeks following her college graduation in Paris. She lived on the same street as two of the restaurants that were attacked.
Yeah, for me it's a very sad news and I was very shocked. when I heard about this news. I was in vacations, I didn't expect this. I've got many friends who live in Paris.
She says her family and friends are all okay. She says she's fearful to return home, but determined to move forward. News that one of the terrorists in the attacks may have come through Greece as a Syrian refugee has prompted several states in the U.S. to say they'll turn away all Syrian refugees. Peggy Pico has an update on the impact in San Diego.
San Diego is expected to receive up to 400 Syrian refugees of the estimated 10,000 headed to the U.S. President Obama addressed concerns about Syrian refugees in his speech this morning.
We also have to remember that many of these refugees are the victims of terrorism themselves. That's what they're fleeing. Slamming the door in their faces would be a betrayal of our values. Our nations can welcome refugees who are desperately seeking safety and ensure our own security. We can and must do both.
Joining me is Hanif Mohebi, Executive Director of San Diego's CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations. And Hanif, what kind of backlash do Muslims in San Diego face when there's been a terrorist attack like the one in Paris?
Before I start, want to say that it was a despicable act. It is an act that we condemn very strongly, and our hearts and minds are with the people in France and all over the world, people and victims of terrorism. As far as the backlash is concerned, we get emails, threats, and some of those threats, unfortunately, sometimes can go to the level of physical violence. We've had in the past. So just this year, for example, we've had over 45 hate mail and threats that have been reported, and some of them have gotten to the level of physical violence and others criminal acts. But I want to focus that today we want to make sure that we are condemning terrorism and nothing else.
Understood. But in his speech today, President Obama talked about the difference of ideologies between the terrorist group ISIS and traditional Islam. But he also said, and this is him, saying that there has not been enough pushback by Muslim leaders against extremism. What is your response to the president's comment?
So first, we want to thank President Obama for distinguishing between essentially the religion and terrorists. It's very important for us to do that. On his second point, I think our community has been doing great work on this, but the institutions and the government needs to make sure that they work with the right grassroots individuals and communities in order to bring about a better result. So Muslim Americans have been speaking out very loudly, but have we been heard? That's a question that needs to be asked. And also, who are the administration working with? Is it working with specific chosen leaders, or is it the representative of the communities?
Who would you like to see then in the communities maybe that haven't been spoken to or addressed as much as you think they should be?
I think, for example, let's talk about countering violent extremism in a program that the government is trying to push. We have come out, as well as many other majority of Muslim leaders have come out saying this is unconstitutional, this is wrong, we still want to work against terrorism. Why don't you, instead of giving us a script of what to do, why don't you work with us in order to come up with strategies to get out of this misery that we're all in?
And speaking of working together, we've talked with you many times. You've been on many other news shows talking about the perceptions of Muslims in this country and abroad, especially when something like this happens. What should San Diegans be asking, or Americans, I should say, even when it comes to terrorists?
I think we need to understand first of all, who are the terrorists? So terrorism has no religion whatsoever. Criminals are criminals. We need to understand that. We need to hold them accountable for, and we need to unite against that. So first and foremost, we need to define terrorism, who are they, and then go from there.
All right, Hanif Mohebi, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Our coverage on the Paris attacks continues online at kpbs.org. And on the PBS NewsHour, Hari Srinivasana reports from France on the investigation. That starts at 7 p.m. right here on KPBS. $1 billion. That's the price paid to buy San Diego's Ballast Point Brewing and Spirits. The new owners also distributes Corona and Pacifico beer. KPBS reporter Eric Anderson explains what this means for San Diego's beer business.
San Diego's Ballast Point Brewing and Spirits is now owned by the nation's third largest beer maker and distributor. Constellation Brands is headquartered in Victor, New York. Ballast Point is the second craft brewery to be bought out by an out-of-town firm in 3 months. St. Archer was sold to InBev Coors in September. Kevin Hopkins is president of the San Diego Brewers Guild. He says some craft beer purists may see this as bad, but he sees a glass half full.
They're not all small anymore. And so now they've grown up and they're doing big things. That means the middle-sized breweries are going to move up, and the smaller boutique breweries are also going to move up. To some people, this is going to invigorate them.
The company was on track to go public in an effort to raise money. Those plans have been shelved. Vince Vasquez studies the local craft beer industry for the National University System Institute for Policy Research. He says local brewers will have sales estimated at more than $1 billion this year. Vasquez says the local craft brewing industry is being noticed by savvy investors.
This shows that it's a viable product. It's something that's a good investment. And it's something that we expect to see grow and develop in a way that brings more tourism business and sales tax revenue, more economic growth to the San Diego region.
Ballast Point makes beer at 4 San Diego facilities. The company sold $115 million worth of beer last year, and Ballast Point sells beer in 30 states. The company's Sculpin beer outsells every other beer sold in San Diego County. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
Tijuana is seeing its most violent year since 2010. The number of homicides through the first week of November has already surpassed last year's total. KPBS Fronteras reporter Jean Guerrero has more.
There have been more than 540 homicides so far this year in Tijuana. In all of 2014, the city saw only 493 homicides. Tijuana crime experts say the spike in violence is tied to cartel infighting for control of the local drug market. As the U.S. has increased border security, drug addiction in Tijuana has gone up, especially to methamphetamine.
It has become harder to cross drugs into the U.S., so that drug stays here, in the border city of Tijuana.
Miguel Guerrero, head of investigations for Tijuana's prosecutor, says killings involve low-level dealers competing for drug consumers on certain street blocks. He says tourists are not at risk. The violence has not reached 2010 levels, when there were more than 800 homicides in Tijuana. Jean Guerrero, KPBS News.
There was a heated exchange at a meeting last week of the City Council's Sustainable Energy Advisory Board, which advises the City Council and Mayor on energy policies. KPBS reporter Claire Trageser has the rundown.
The program would take energy purchasing power away from San Diego Gas and Electric and give it to the city. State law says SDG&E can't lobby against the program. A member of the Sustainable Energy Advisory Board works for SDG&E. The city attorney's office says that means that board member shouldn't vote or join in discussions on community choice aggregation. The utility employee disagreed, saying the ban violates his First Amendment rights. Environmental leader Nicole Capritz was at the meeting and says it signaled to her that SDG&E won't support community choice aggregation, despite posting on their website that they do support the program.
They basically revealed that is not their true position, and in fact they are going to be using mostly back channels to, again, stymie the public's opportunity to have an alternative provider.
SDG&E's special counsel Thomas Brill also spoke at the meeting to say the utility isn't trying to lobby. It just wants to make sure the city board's analysis is accurate. Claire Trageser, KPBS News.
They're trying to end homelessness among veterans. The Veterans Administration has been going into courts and the prison system, including San Diego. KPBS reporter Steve Walsh shows us the coordinators who reach out to vets behind bars.
I first met Sean Teller while he was locked inside the Vista Detention Facility in San Diego County. He didn't name the charge, but he was clear about why he thought he was there.
Substance abuse problems.
What happened?
I was convicted of a crime that pertained to my substance abuse. And I self-medicating and made some irresponsible choices.
Sean joined the Marine Corps hoping to turn around a cycle of drugs and alcohol that started when his mother died while he was in high school. For a while it did. He was sober through a 7-month tour in Helmand Province in Afghanistan, but after he came back to Camp Pendleton, he began drinking.
Before I got out of the Marine Corps, I was actually, I went to SARP, which is a substance abuse rehabilitation program in Point Loma. It was a very good program. I felt very optimistic about the future and had a lot of good things in place. However, a support network wasn't out here. And 1 week after I got out, my brother's helicopter went down in Afghanistan. We joined the same day. He had a 5-year contract, I had a 4-year. So on January 20th, 2012, I got a phone call from my sister and found out my brother had died in Afghanistan. He was on a CH-53 as a crew chief, and everyone on the helicopter was killed. And I relapsed at that point, and I was not strong in my recovery yet, and made some poor decisions.
He tried the VA but didn't follow up. Instead, Sean had several brushes with the law before winding up homeless. I found him in the county jail on a unit dedicated to veterans, serving a 3-month sentence on drug-related charges. In recent years, the VA began doing more to find veterans behind bars as part of an effort to end homelessness among vets.
They found that there was a gap between those who are in custody and getting out. Usually when you're released, it's okay, here's a bus token, figure out where you're going to go.
Vets in prison have higher rates of mental illness and substance abuse than other veterans, though they don't always seek treatment. If the VA can link up with these vets while they're in jail, it's highly likely they can get them into treatment once they're released.
Our goal is not to end incarceration among veterans. What we're trying to do is to ensure that when veterans do have contact with the criminal justice system, that there are effectively off-ramps into needed treatment.
Each VA medical center in the U.S. has at least one person dedicated to work with the local justice system. They've reached out to a number of jails and prisons around the country. When Sean Teller walked out of the jail in September, someone from the VA was waiting for him.
So there's a lot of moving parts to actually get somebody out of custody into my care, basically, and then taken to wherever they need to go.
Sean is what people in the program like to call a direct deposit. To eliminate any possibility of him walking away, the VA takes people like him right into care. In Sean's case, a 28-day inpatient treatment program run by the VA.
We're all given a locker, a place to hang your towel, some clothes. And this is the bathroom. It's pretty nice.
I talked to Sean again after he had arrived at Veterans Village in San Diego. He's scheduled to live there for the next year. His MRAP struck an IED in Afghanistan. On top of drug treatment, he'll be treated for PTSD, eventually job training. The Marine veteran had just turned 30, and he was making plans to get a degree in organic farming.
I don't feel like this is a low point at all, actually. This is one of the first times since I was 15 years old that I've actually been sober on my birthday.
Despite his progress, Sean hadn't told his sister in Florida where he's been these past several months.
I don't want to worry her at this point,
What would be the report right now?
That I'm doing really well. I mean, I don't want to tell her that I went to jail to come back to the realization that I need to get my life together, but it's the truth.
They don't have programs like Veterans Village in every part of the country, and the VA hasn't done enough research to determine whether or not if this type of outreach will actually keep veterans out of prison. Sean thinks that it will. Clearly, for veterans struggling with drugs and mental health issues, it's a step up from leaving jail to go back on the streets. Steve Walsh, KPBS News.
Water bills in San Diego may be getting a lot more expensive. KPBS Metro reporter Andrew Bowen takes a look at tomorrow's city council vote that may lead to a series of rate increases.
The North City Water Reclamation Plant is a maze of tangled pipes and tubes. The city pumps in dirty sewage here, and out comes clean drinking water. This site is part of San Diego's ambitious water recycling project called Pure Water. It aims to provide a third of the city's drinking water by 2035, and that would be a boon to a city that currently imports 85 to 90% of its water. But Hala Razak, director of the Public Utilities Department, says the Pure Water program could end if the San Diego City Council votes no on the water rate increase.
We are not in control of our water or of our destiny, and doing something like Pure Water or even the desalination plant, which is a regional asset, gives us more control here locally.
That desalination plant in Carlsbad is about to come online, and while its water is local, it's also some of the most expensive on the market. Razak says the rate increase before the city council is to pay for those long-term investments in water autonomy. It would also fund infrastructure improvements, including replacing the city's aging pipelines.
When you postpone those, you end up having to react to things when they break. And we know very well when something breaks, it costs a lot more to fix it because then you're working at an emergency level.
Now, there are several reasons why the city council has to vote on this water rate increase, and one of them is conservation. That's because most of the city's water costs are fixed, but most of its revenue changes depending on how much water people actually use. So when people use less water, the city gets less money and has to charge more. That's what bothers Councilman David Alvarez. He says the rate structure on the table punishes thrifty water customers for doing the right thing and conserving.
Those individuals that want to continue to waste water, who want to treat water as a luxury, they should pay for the extra cost of the water in our city. And the way this is being proposed, it doesn't do that.
But Hala Razak says with the ongoing drought and a growing population in California, expensive water is likely to become the new normal. Sustainable projects like water recycling are the future, she says, and that's where San Diegans have to put their money.
Cheers. Cheers.
Andrew Bowen, KPBS News.
Peggy Pico has more analysis on the proposed water rate hike.
Joining me are San Diego City Councilman David Alvarez and Executive Director of the Water Reliability Coalition, Lonnie Lutar. And David, I understand that the average bill of a typical single-family home in San Diego would increase from $70.81 to $77.25 on January 1st and up to $82.33 on July 1st if this measure gets approved, I should say, if this plan gets approved. Why are you opposed to this kind of increase? Why are you opposed to this plan?
Well, I think the figures that you just gave are probably for the low water users. You know, for those who are in the other tiers, they will see a different increase. At the end of the day, it's a 17% increase in less than 1 year. That's a big jump. And it's about a 40% increase over the next 5 years. That is really, really drastic, and it's a difficult one. This is a difficult choice to make for sure. Now, what we need to focus on is making sure that we continue to incentivize those who are conserving, those who are not being wasteful. And there are a lot of San Diegans, and they're out there who have said, I've done everything I possibly can. Let's not see the water rates increase for those, but those who are being excessive in their water use.
And I want to come back to that, but first I want to ask Lonnie, one of the reasons for this proposed rate increase is a long-term investment in our region's water autonomy. Why is water autonomy important?
Well, San Diego has a lot of water that we import from up north, and that imported water is very costly. It's also not environmentally sensitive. The city of San Diego is proposing to make an infrastructure investment with this upcoming rate increase, which would pay for Pure Water San Diego, which will ultimately provide up to 1/3 of the city's water supply. This would be locally controlled and drought-proof, and it's also supported by every major environmental organization in San Diego.
Well, critics, and including David Alvarez, says that this rate increase unfairly punishes people who have been conserving water. You've conserved water, you've done your job, and now your bill's going to go up. What's your response?
Well, unfortunately, we can't control weather situations. We've been in a drought for a long time, and the governor's mandate, I think, was unanticipated by many. We don't have control over that. What we do have control over is ensuring that when future droughts come, that San Diego is prepared. We want to make sure that we continue to invest in the infrastructure and make sure that we don't see the same type of water main breaks and sewer spills that the city used to see at a highly excessive rate not that long ago. We don't want to go back to those days. We want to continue those investments in infrastructure, which is the most important and responsible thing that the city council can can do.
So, David, what would you like to see instead of this plan?
Yeah, I've been saying this now for a couple of months publicly. I've shared it with the mayor privately in addition, where we need to ensure that we have a pricing structure that continues to incentivize those who aren't being wasteful with their water. I look at the issue with the chargers, which everybody knows what's been going on with that. The mayor is touting the support from the governor, saying, he's behind us on this. We need to be going to the governor and saying, hey, this is not right. We need to change the way state law works. We need to continue to incentivize those who are being very watchful about the water that they use, and those who are treating water as a luxury and they're wasteful, in my mind. They should be paying for those very expensive costs that Lonnie identified. Yes, it's very costly to bring water from so far away to our infrastructure system. So let's make sure the people that are being wasteful, those that are being cognizant of what this means, have them pay for it. That's the tier structure that would make sense.
Unfortunately, we are out of time. City Councilman David Alvarez and Lonnie Lutar, thank you so much. And I want to let folks know, though, that the public hearing on the water rate increase plan is tomorrow, November 17th at 10 a.m. at Council Chambers in the City Administration Building downtown. We've got more information at kpbs.org.
We'll see more brisk autumn weather on tap with a possible warm-up later this week. 60s and 70s by the beaches, 60s and 80s in the inland valleys. Sunny skies in the mountains with 50s and 60s, 70s and 80s in the desert. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thank you for joining us. Have a great evening.